accused of doing something very much against his religion, hiring a hitman to kill his estranged wife.
He was ordered to begin serving a 30-day jail sentence for manslaughter and drunk driving.
He lunged on me and, got me down to the floor and started strangling me.
For a string of historic sex offences dating back to the 1970s, allegedly committed against young girls.
That one charge alone potentially carries a sentence of life in prison.
Tim Lambesis is the lead singer for the band As I Lay Dying, a successful metalcore group often labeled as a Christian band despite not identifying as one. However, Tim was outspokenly Christian and always had the good guy persona, thanking God for his success, adopting 3 children from Ethiopia, and playing the role of a caring husband and father. So how does someone like this end up hiring a hitman to murder his wife? Well, out of nowhere in 2012, Lambesis emails his wife asking for a divorce. He says he doesn't believe in God anymore and can no longer stay with her. Then, in what can only be described as disturbing, Tim casually asks somebody at the gym if they know anyone who can kill his wife. Now, this is one of the most deranged things you could be asked, so of course the guy went straight to the police. What followed next was a multi-month-long undercover sting operation to bust Lambesis. Tim would later meet with an undercover officer posing as a hitman named Red. Red would go on to ask, "Do you want your wife of 8 years gone?" In which Lambesis would reply yes. He then handed $1,000 over to the agent with pictures of his wife, her address, gate code, and dates to carry out the hit. And what's especially dark is that he asked the hit to happen while he was with his kids just so he'd have an alibi. All in all, he agreed to pay $20,000 for the act to be carried out.
Prosecutors say this was a cold-blooded plan that Tim Lambesis fully intended to follow through on. Under this plea deal, he's looking at up to 9 years in prison, and prosecutors say they intend to push for the max.
Lambesis was arrested May 7, 2013, originally pleading not guilty. But once faced with overwhelming evidence, he changed his plea to guilty, with the judge handing him a 6-year sentence for solicitation of murder. Less than 3 years later, Tim walked free. He was released for good behavior, and later blamed his actions on steroid abuse, saying it clouded his judgment. Now, things went quiet for a while, but in 2018, something absolutely insane happened. Lambesis rejoined As I Lay Dying, sparking major backlash within the rock scene. But somehow things got worse. Tim has since gone on to get married 2 additional times, with domestic issues already being brought to light. Videos with his most recent wife Dani were leaked online, showing how erratic and mentally unstable he is. Not only are these videos disturbing to watch, but there's even one with him striking a dog multiple times. All of this has led to guitarist Phil Scroso leaving the group, with him saying, "I have been witness to concerning patterns of behavior, and the band no longer offers a healthy or safe environment for anyone involved." Our next case is truly shocking because it faded into obscurity despite involving one of the most popular rock bands of all time. The guy who sings Hotel California was arrested after police found 2 underage girls inside of his home. This is Don Henley, founding member, drummer, and co-lead singer for the Eagles. The guy is the epitome of a successful rock star. So what exactly happened that fateful night in 1980? Well, Henley was apparently hosting a gathering with friends at his home, but as the evening went on, something went very wrong. A girl collapsed due to an overdose. Now, when the paramedics arrived, they found a bizarre sight. One girl unresponsive and naked, and another barely coherent and under the influence of drugs. Moments later, the police would arrive, finding cocaine and quaaludes scattered around the house, and instantly placing Henley under arrest. Shockingly, both girls were also arrested, one for prostitution and the other for drug use, while Henley got a much lesser charge. Despite the disturbing details, Henley was only charged with aiding to the delinquency of a minor, where he pleaded no contest. He didn't do a single day in jail, only paid a $2,500 fine, and got 2 years of probation. Meanwhile, his career was largely unaffected. For decades, the case faded into obscurity, but in 2024 it would resurface. During a battle over stolen song lyrics, the 1980 incident was brought up. Contrary to Henley's original claim of hosting a gathering, he told his probation officer, "I wanted to forget what was going on. I wanted to escape the depression I was in." So he placed a call to a sex worker, who then sent the girl to his home that night. Now, Henley claimed they attempted to make love, but didn't know she was underage, with it being a poor decision, which I regret to this day. The December 8th, 1984. Vince Neil gets behind the wheel of his De Tomaso Pantera, drunk, reckless, and completely unaware that his next decision would change rock history forever. Moments later, another rock star was dead.
He was ordered to begin serving a 30-day jail sentence for manslaughter and drunk driving.
In the early 80s, both Motley Crue and Hanoi Rocks were blowing up in the glam metal scene. Hanoi was from Finland, but the two got to meet when they came to America to tour for the first time, and the bands instantly hit it off. Especially Vince and Hanoi's drummer, Nicholas Razzle Dingley. To celebrate this newfound friendship, Motley Crue threw a massive party in their honor. A night that started fun, but would ultimately end in disaster. At some point during the evening, Vince and Nick decide to make a liquor run. On the way back to the house, Vince loses control of the vehicle, resulting in a massive collision. Now, Vince's blood alcohol levels were almost twice the legal limit, and not only did Nicholas suffer a tragic fate, but two passengers in the other vehicle were critically injured, both suffering brain damage. The death of Razzle really affected the rock scene, and Hanoi Rocks even more. Their first US tour was canceled, and most say they never truly recovered from the incident. Vince would go on to plead guilty to vehicular manslaughter and driving under the influence. He was only sentenced to 30 days in jail alongside 5 years of probation. However, he was also ordered to pay $2.6 million in restitution to the victims' families. Vince later said, "I wrote a $2.5 million check for vehicular manslaughter when Razzle died. I should have gone to prison." Now, Vince was young here, and this statement definitely seemed like a wake-up call. But over the years, he's been arrested on numerous occasions. Assault, fighting on the strip, battery charges, and another DUI in 2010. The fact he got behind the wheel drunk again after taking a life is truly careless. A lot of you know the name Gary Glitter, and you likely also know about his crimes, but you probably didn't realize that his case is still unfolding to this day. Just over a year ago, a new development happened, and let's just say, his story is honestly sick. Paul Gadd, otherwise known as Gary Glitter, was a rock star who achieved success in the early 70s by rebranding himself during the glam metal era. Music wasn't just a hobby for him. Paul was obsessed, even releasing his first single at just 15 years old. Throughout the 60s, he experimented with tons of different styles, stage names, and collaborators trying to find the right sound. However, nothing really stuck. But then in 1971, everything changed. He reinvented himself as Gary Glitter, a flamboyant character with over-the-top costumes and highly energetic live performances. Instantly, he found success with single after single, and it wouldn't take long before Gary solidified his status as a glam rock icon. For years, he packed arenas and sold millions of records. But in 1997, his career would be destroyed forever. Gary took his laptop to a store for repairs, where a technician noticed some disturbing content on his hard drive. He immediately notified the authorities, leading to Gary's arrest shortly after. Now, he pleaded guilty to possession of child content, revealing he had downloaded over 4,000 images and was sentenced to 4 months in prison. But it's after his release where things would take an unbelievable turn. He fled to Spain under a fake name, but after being recognized, he had to relocate to Cuba. The same thing happened there, so he then ran to Cambodia in 2002. However, the locals were not accepting, labeling him as a threat and deporting him instantly. By 2005, he had vanished to Vietnam. But as we've learned before, it wouldn't take long before Gary put himself back on the authorities' radar. A total of 6 women came forward, ages 11 to 23, all claiming Glitter had slept with them. He was then arrested, found guilty of obscene acts with a 10 and 11-year-old, and sentenced to 3 years in prison. By 2008, Glitter was released and deported back to the UK, and for a while things went quiet. That was until 2015, where all the crimes from his past would finally catch up with him. A documentary titled The Other Side of Jimmy Savile was released, exposing a lot of misconduct with minors behind the scenes. The doc featured Gary and led to a full-blown investigation where they found him guilty of horrific things.
Guilty of the attempted rape of a child under the age of 10, guilty of 5 indecent assaults, guilty of 6 with a child under the age of 13. That one charge alone potentially carries a sentence of life in prison. He is almost 71 years of age now, Paul Gadd, so potentially he could die behind bars.
You'd think after 3 prison sentences, being kicked out of multiple countries, and decades of disgrace, Glitter would have learned his lesson. Well, in 2023, he was released after serving almost a decade behind bars. Just weeks later, he was rearrested for violating terms of his parole. The guy literally tried accessing illegal online content while being monitored. The authorities threw him back in prison, where he'll now remain for the rest of his life. Before we jump into our next case, I just want to mention that everyone on this list has been conscious during their crimes. However, Ozzy Osbourne wasn't in his right mind during this one, and it also nearly ruined his life. While Ozzy has done some insane things like peeing on the Alamo and biting the head off of a bat, one crime was so disturbing, it almost led to his wife leaving him. In 1989, Ozzy was suffering from a major addiction to drugs and alcohol. On a seemingly normal night, he snapped into a psychotic episode and attempted to strangle Sharon.
We came home from the restaurant. I was downstairs, he was up. Suddenly he comes downstairs a couple of hours later. He's got his underpants on. I thought he was ready for bed, and suddenly...
She recalls him calmly saying, "We've come to a decision. You've got to die."
He lunged on me and, got me down to the floor and started strangling me.
How close did it get?
Pretty damn close. Pretty damn close.
He was so far gone at the time, he didn't have a single memory of what had happened when he woke up in a cell. I asked the cop, "Why am I here?" And he says, "John Michael Osbourne, you have been arrested for attempted murder." Now, most rock stars who go this far don't get a second chance, but Ozzy was able to learn from the incident. The moment led to him going to rehab, getting sober, and marked a major turning point in his life. Before Ike Turner became one of the most infamous people in rock, he was actually a pioneer of the genre itself. His band, the Kings of Rhythm, recorded what many consider to be the very first rock song ever.
You women have heard of jalopies, you heard the noise they make, but let me introduce my new rocket 88.
This was back in 1951, before Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, before the genre even had a name. But in 1957, his life would change forever when he met a woman by the name of Anna Mae Bullock, later known to the world as Tina Turner. Tina went to see Ike's band play for the first time, and directly after begged for a chance to sing with him.
So, he's standing on top of a piano, and the band is really going, and I thought, wow, I'd like to sing with this band,
Although Ike wasn't interested, he was convinced women couldn't sing rock and roll. So one night during an intermission, Tina grabbed the microphone and left the crowd speechless. Ike and the rest of the group were so impressed that they instantly made her a prominent vocalist. And over the next few years, the band would find tons of success. But behind the scenes, Ike and Tina's relationship was spiraling into something horrifying. Ike was known for his explosive temper and addiction to cocaine, which only got worse the more famous they got. Success didn't make things better. In fact, it was their very first hit single which led Ike to start abusing her. And from that moment on, this pattern would last over a decade. He used his fists, coat hangers, shoes, and even scorched her with hot coffee. Tina later recalled, "He used my nose as a punching bag so many times that I could taste blood running down my throat when I sang." And perhaps the worst part of all this is that no one really knew. To the world, they appeared like a happy couple. It would be almost 20 years of suffering before Tina would make her escape in 1976. After yet another violent altercation, she slipped out of a hotel room in Dallas and never looked back. 2 years later, the divorce finalized, but Tina walked away with nothing. She relinquished her shared money and assets just to be free from Ike with no attachments. And for years, he downplayed and denied the abuse.
You admit that you have slapped Tina before, but why, Ike?
She would be walking around looking sad, with a lip drop, and I keep asking her, "And what is the matter with you? What's wrong?" And it's always, "Nothing." And it would go on for a day or two till finally, "Why the don't you?" And then this is where I would slap her or something. Then she would change her mood or attitude or something.
Although Tina didn't let him bury the truth. In 1986, she exposed years of abuse in gruesome detail in her memoir titled I, Tina. While Ike never got charged for the crimes against her, he did get sentenced to 4 years in prison over drugs. This addiction slowly destroyed his career, while Tina became a global superstar in the 80s. Years later, Ike would try to make a comeback, but it was too late. His reputation was ruined, and name forever tarnished for his crimes. It's not often we get to look inside of an actual murder trial, let alone one committed by a rock star. But an even stranger occurrence is burning down multiple churches, committing murder, and then having this reaction to sentencing. This is Varg Vikernes, and before we dive into his crimes, we need to understand where his beliefs started. His father was an openly racist man who thought his Norwegian heritage and skin color made him a superior person. These beliefs would be shown to Varg from a young age, and especially ingrained after his family moved to Iraq. It's here in Baghdad where Varg would discover his first taste of power, using it to abuse his status in school. His mother recalled that he would taunt teachers without repercussions, while other children in the class would be slapped. Now, Varg thought this was due to him being white, but it was likely likely because of his father's important work at the time. Upon returning home to Norway, it's believed that Varg was part of the neo-Nazi skinhead culture while coming up in the music scene. Throughout the late 80s, he played with a few different people, and by 1991, he'd break into the black metal scene with a solo project called Burzum. He actually did all the compositions, vocals, and instrumentation, which gave him a lot of praise amongst other musicians. Despite the respect, the black metal scene wasn't huge at the time. However, he was starting to collaborate with someone by the name of Euronymous. Euro even released Burzum's early work through his label, and the two would go on to become pretty close. Not long after, Varg would join their band Mayhem, a group infamous for their obsession with death, violence, and anti-Christian themes. It's here where we'd begin to see the downfall of Varg. In 1992, while Mayhem was recording their debut album, a church nearby was mysteriously set aflame. However, no one knew who was behind it. This was the first major arson tied to the black metal scene, and Varg was a suspect but never convicted for the crime. Just 2 months later, multiple historic churches were burned across Norway.
This is the type of music believed to be responsible for a wave of attacks on churches in Northern Europe. Called black metal music, it's overtly anti-Christian and synonymous with satanic worship. This church in Bergen, Norway was burned to the ground. In all, 30 Norwegian churches have suffered a similar fate.
The people responsible? Varg and Euronymous. To them, burning these churches wasn't just about anti-Christian beliefs, it was about chaos and pushing extremist ideologies. And for Varg, it went way past religion. His views on race were just as extreme, and he wanted to use black metal as the platform to spread them. In fact, he went on to openly brag about the burnings in a newspaper interview. This led to police doing a full-blown investigation on the case, and at this same time, tensions between Euro and Varg were rising. And by early 1993, the two had started to heavily clash. This was mainly due to money. Varg claimed he was owed for Burzum's album. It's here where the story would get a bit more muddied, but here's what's believed to have transpired. Varg claimed Euro was planning to kill him, although there is no concrete evidence to back this up. Then on August 10th, 1993, everything came to a head. Varg drove to Euro's apartment in the middle of the night, and what happened next was extremely disturbing. Euronymous was stabbed 23 times, 2 wounds to the head, 5 to the neck, and 16 to the back. Varg claimed self-defense, but the evidence told a different story. And less than 10 days later, Varg was arrested. In May of '94, he'd be convicted of murder, arson of multiple churches, and the possession of 300 pounds of explosives. He showed zero remorse during the trial, and his sentence, 21 years. After serving 15, Varg was released in 2009 for good behavior. Almost immediately, new music under Burzum, writing books, and pushing extremist views online. He even started a YouTube channel where he openly spread white supremacist ideals under the cover of Norse mythology and paganism. He was permanently banned from the platform for hate speech in 2019.